What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today is an absolutely massive news day when it comes to Call of Duty. We've got so many new details regarding Vanguard, the Warzone integration, zombies, multiplayer, just everything. And it's honestly too much for me to cover it with the sort of depth that I'd like to all in one video, so I'm gonna actually have to break this up into a few videos. For today's video, my primary focus is going to be on Vanguard's multiplayer for now, so what I wanted to talk about today are going to be the changes that we can expect to see from the beta build of the game till launch for multiplayer. And I've got to say right up front, I am absolutely blown away by this list of changes and fixes that they've stated that we'll see for launch. Obviously, we haven't gotten our hands on this yet, and I will have to test it to make sure this all lives up to the hype, but at least on paper, things are looking incredible, and it really seems like Sledgehammer is listening. And the first thing on the list here that is absolutely massive news for me is they're actually adding Ninja as a perk in Vanguard. For those that have been watching my channel for a while, my number one gameplay related concern with Vanguard has been footstep audio. The audio in general was completely messed up for the beta, so we were expecting big changes from beta to launch, and I was terrified that the footstep audio would end up being super loud like Modern Warfare 2019, with no ability to have a perk that permanently dampens your footstep audio. Instead, we'd be limited to a field upgrade, and as somebody that loves rushing and flanking, that's a type of thing that could easily destroy my gameplay style. And they've listened to the complaints, they've listened to the feedback and criticism here. They are adding Ninja. It looks like in the tier 1 slot, they're replacing low profile with Ninja. And therefore, I will be competing with Ghost as well as Fortified, which is like Flak Jacket. So it is going to be in a very competitive category, but I just love the fact that they've at least added it. Next up, visibility. There's a huge section on visibility here. This is one of the big complaints throughout the beta, and this wasn't just one particular piece of visibility that was a problem. There were a bunch of little visibility issues, so let's go through them. First up, they removed the distortion effects from muzzle flash, and they've also reduced the amount of smoke that is emitted when you fire your gun. Those are two changes that I asked for in the beta, and I'm really happy to see that at launch. Of course, we will have to see how that ends up looking like in the full build of the game, but sounds great on paper. Additionally, they completed a pass on muzzle flash placement and coverage when aiming down sight. Presumably this is going to be so it doesn't fully block your view, like there will still be muzzle flash, but it won't be completely blocking your target. Then they changed up the VFX environment ambient placement for better sight lines. I don't know exactly what that means. I feel like that could be the weird like hazy sort of effects, where on certain lines of sight, you could see really clearly from one direction looking at the other player, but they couldn't see you at all due to this weird haze that only appeared when looking in one direction. I feel like that's what this is referring to. Then they've removed the droplets of water that get all up in your face when it rains. If you guys remember from the beta, if you guys are playing on Gavutu, you would actually have water droplets like on your screen, it would look like, which is a cool looking effect, but that's a type of thing that should be limited to more of a campaign environment where it's more about immersion than competitive gameplay. So I'm glad they removed that from multiplayer. Then they fixed various bugs with certain optics where it would stop enemy and friendly heads-up display icons from being displayed when you're aiming down sight with various optics. I personally didn't run into that in the beta, but it's nice to see they're fixing it. They've also fixed cases where name tags were appearing through destructible walls or environments, which is something that I mainly had an issue with in the alpha. I didn't really experience it too much in the beta, but it's nice to see they've tightened things up even more there. They've also reduced the lens flare across all of the maps, so this is referring mainly to the sun and the brightness of the sun completely taking over everything if you were looking in the general direction of where the sun was. And then they also just made an extra note here saying they are going to continue to refine this over time. So if more issues pop up at launch, they will be continuing to work on visibility. So far, this is looking incredible. Visibility was a major complaint of mine throughout the beta. Now let's move on to audio, and this is something that was just completely screwed in the beta. Like, audio was in a terrible state in the beta, and they said they'd be adjusting it, but now we have some more details. So the first thing is they've done a complete mixing and content overhaul. So expect the audio to sound completely different at launch compared to beta. Again, this is the type of thing where we have to see, or I guess hear for ourselves once we get to launch. But I am hoping they've really tightened things up and made it sound a lot better so you can actually tell where things are in relation to you. Like when an enemy fires a gun 10 feet from you, you should have a pretty good indication that there's an enemy firing a gun 10 feet from you. Also, they have stated that footsteps will be more audible by default, which I think is totally fine, especially with the addition of the Ninja perk. Although I still hope they don't push footstep audio too loud like Modern Warfare, otherwise Ninja could then become a complete crutch perk in every game mode. I'd much rather see them balance it in a way where Ninja is a nice bonus, but it's not 100% necessary, at least in like really loud respawn game modes. They also made a note that footsteps will still be silent if players are aim down sight walking, crouch walking, or have a perk or field upgrade. So it seems like that silence is still going to be a field upgrade as well, so it looks like you'll have the option for that, which I think is really nice to see. Then apparently there was a bug that caused shots after the first shot to be too quiet. I don't recall ever experiencing this, but they said that they did get on top of that and fix it. Then they've made it so the operators themselves, like your operator, is going to be talking a lot less often. They're not going to be constantly talking as they're in battle, which is great. And also Butcher, the announcer, his voiceover lines are going to be occurring a lot less often. So he's not going to be constantly yelling in your ear like he was in the beta. As for spawns, they basically just said they're fixing a bunch of the spawns. They made a lot of adjustments to spawns, especially in the patrol mode. And this is the type of thing that will take them time, especially with the new maps that we didn't have access to in the beta. It will take them time to get these nailed down. So don't expect perfect spawns at launch, but hopefully within the first month or so, they'll be able to get on top of these and get them in a much better state. As for movement, grenades and incendiaries will no longer slow down the movement speed of players, which is excellent to see. It was kind of annoying that grenades had sort of a stun effect on top of the damage effect that they'd give you. They don't have that anymore. They've also placed a cap on the maximum amount of suppression effect that you receive. And when it comes to suppression, this is another big concern I have with Vanguard, but we haven't had the ability to test this in a controlled environment. So I don't really want to speak on it too much until I can properly test it. But it is nice to see that they're at least aware of the concerns, and they have added a cap to that to make sure it doesn't get too out of hand, hopefully. Then they've made changes to animation times, including weapon swap speeds and throwing equipment, for instance. And sprint out times have been sped up and rebalanced across the board, which is another big piece of feedback that I had in the beta. I hope this is a very noticeable change, especially for those big outliers. I hope they speed those up very significantly. And now let's move on to weapons. With the weapons, they made shotguns more lethal, which is good to see because shotguns were almost useless in the beta, or at least without attachments, they were basically useless. Now, in doing so, they also cut down the range of the shotgun, so it's going to be more lethal up close, but not be able to stretch out as far. They've also reduced the range of SMGs and pistols, because those were overperforming at longer ranges, which I experienced in the beta as well. Then, with hipfire spread, they've adjusted them on most of the guns just to make them so they're more in line with each other within the same weapon class. They've reduced the trade-offs for using barrels, magazines, and stocks, so presumably they're not going to be harming you quite as much as they were in the beta for using these. They've also rebalanced ammo types to include more trade-offs, which is another thing I made an entire dedicated video on. Some of the ammo types, like frangible, had no downsides in the beta, and they were just way too powerful and annoying. So I'm really excited to see what sort of trade-offs they have implemented here. Then when we get into kill streaks and field upgrades, friendly spy planes and counter spy planes were showing up for you in the beta, which was really confusing when you were trying to shoot down an enemy spy plane because you couldn't tell if it was enemy or friendly. They have now made it so friendly ones will no longer appear for you, just like it's always been in Call of Duty. Also, they made these spy planes and counter spy planes slower and easier to hit with launchers, which is excellent because that was nearly impossible in the beta. They've also shortened the duration of the counter spy plane because that was way too long in the beta, another piece of feedback that we all provided. And on top of this, the health has been reduced on the spy planes and counter spy planes, so shooting them with guns should be a little bit more effective. You should be able to take them down a bit easier. Also, they did mention that the health has been reduced on most placed field upgrades. And this is great news. The field mic took at least like half a magazine with most guns to take out, which is just too much in my opinion. Then they swapped the score costs for Death Machine and War Machine. They made the glide bomb easier to control. That was a big issue that I had. They added a maximum timer for the radar jammer and field mic field upgrades, which is great because previously in the beta, if you put a field mic down, it would last forever until it was destroyed by an enemy player. And that was a little bit too powerful in my mind. And they fixed the dog NATO bug. For those of you guys that didn't see it, sometimes with a dead attack dog, their whole character model would just glitch out and it would look like some crazy thing from a horror movie. So they have fixed that as well. And then finally, they said that they've replaced low profile with the Ninja perk, which, like I said, that was in the tier 1 slot. So that should be interesting to see how that's all balanced out. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for the list that we got from Sledgehammer regarding the changes from beta to launch for multiplayer. And like I said, at least on paper, this is all looking incredible. Almost every single complaint that I've had with this game throughout the beta has been addressed with this blog post. And this is incredible news. I really think this is going to turn the hype around for a lot of people when it comes to Vanguard. And if they keep this up and continue listening to the community, I think we've potentially got a much better year of Call of Duty on our hands than I initially expected. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts and impressions on this. I'd like to hear from you guys in the comments section below. What do you think about all these changes that they're making from beta to launch? Does this make you a lot more hype for Vanguard's multiplayer? And if you were somebody that was on the fence or you were thinking you weren't getting Vanguard, is this going to be enough to turn things around for you? For those that are still on the fence, I would encourage you to wait until we have access to the game to actually test these changes to make sure they are significant enough to make a difference. But overall, I'm loving it, and I think a lot of you guys will be too. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.